Thanks everyone for joining us today. I certainly appreciate that as well. We've got, as John said, a little different approach here today. We're going to cover some material for about a half hour or so, and then spend the rest of the time going into Q&A, so we can answer whatever questions you have along any front regarding innovation. So again, thanks for being here. What I want to start with is the reason why we're innovating. What are we trying to achieve when we innovate? I guess you could say, what's the job of innovation, right? Well, as product planners, what we're trying to do is conceptualize ideas, solutions that we know with a high level of certainty are going to win in the market before we start developing them. And as you know, as product developers, many times this is not the case. In fact, you may not know if the product's going to win in the market until after you launch it, which of course is not the best time to learn that you've created a failed product. But this happens altogether too often. And what we're going to talk about today is, how do you conceptualize products that you know will win in the market before you even start developing them? So I'll take you on a little journey as we go through this, but this is really the essence of what we're trying to cover. When we worked with Bosch, for example, they knew that their product was going to win in the marketplace. And you can ask, well, how did they know that? How are they so certain that this product was going to win in the marketplace? Well, the reason is it had this feature set, the raft hook, the direct neck system. Well, how did they know those are the right features to put on this product? Well, they satisfied this set of unmet needs. Well, how do we know those are the right unmet needs? Well, it's because we segmented the market around unmet needs and found a segment of tradesmen that was struggling to get the job done along those certain dimensions. And how do we know that we covered all the outcomes? Well, it's because we studied the entire job to be done and looked at how people were trying to either make better progress or what they were trying to avoid as they went about and got that job done. The scenario plays out many times over the years. We helped Kroll OnTrack into the electronic evidence discovery market, and they had a high level of confidence that they were going to win in the marketplace. And this is after failing twice, but the third time they knew they had it right. And why? Well, it's because they added this set of features to their product. Well, how did they know the right features? Because they addressed these unmet needs. And these unmet needs, that's right, were discovered by segmenting the market and studying the customer's job to be done. When we worked with Cox Automotive to help them develop some new software aimed at dealerships, they knew that their product was going to win in the marketplace, even though the initial product had a slow uptick. And how are they so certain? Well, they went back and added this feature set. And again, how did they know that was the right feature set? It's because it addressed these unmet needs. And they were certain they were the unmet needs because they found them in the marketplace and quantified them. And that happened because they studied the customer's entire job to be done and try to figure out where they were struggling to get the job done better. So by following this kind of approach, what we're trying to do is help companies pursue big ideas to help them get there before the competition does and to win every time. And I think this is really the ultimate goal of the innovation process. You want to conceptualize products you know are going to win. They're going to be big ideas. You're going to beat the competition there, and it's going to win. So how do we approach this? Well, of course, we got to look at it through a little different lens. What we want to do is replace the solution lens with the problem lens. So instead of seeing the world of innovation through the eyes of the drill maker, if you will, we're going to see the world of innovation through the eyes of the hole maker. And when you do that, the first thing you probably notice is the reason why people buy products to begin with. And that's to get a job done. As we say, people buy products and services to get a job done. And a job can be a task that they're trying to accomplish, a goal or objective they're trying to achieve, a problem they're trying to solve, something they're trying to avoid. It really is anything this group of people are trying to accomplish. So given that, and given that's the reason why people buy products, we should think about innovation as a process, and the process of devising a solution that gets a job done significantly better than competing solutions. And so what we have to do before we even begin developing the product is know that it's going to get the job done significantly better than competing solutions. And there is a pathway for getting there. It's called the outcome-driven innovation process. I know many of you have heard it, but it makes it possible to conceptualize winning products, again, before development begins, you have that high level of confidence. The approach sounds like marketing 101 approach, but everything that we're going to talk about here is through the lens of the hole maker, not the drill maker. So we're going to talk about how we define a market. We're going to talk about how we define and discover customer needs, how we quantify and prioritize those needs to see which are unmet, how we segment the market around unmet needs so we can find opportunities in different segments of the market, and then how we use all that data to build out our strategy, our growth strategy, product strategy. So these are the key elements, and I'm going to go into each one in detail, and we'll have a little polling question in each one as well, just to engage the team and test a couple of hypotheses here. So the first section is defining the market. Again, we know people buy products and services to get a job done. So we're going to define a market through that lens. But before we get there, let's pull up the first poll. What I'd love to see from the group is there agreement on your product team as to how to best define the markets that you serve? So is there agreement on how to define the markets that you serve? And John, we can give it another 10 seconds or so. And this is the first key step in the process, right? Is we have to know what market are we in. And John, I think you're sharing the results there. Is that right? Yeah. And you can see about 2/3 say, no, there is not agreement. About 1/3 says there is agreement. So keep that in mind. It's one data point. So there isn't overwhelming agreement on what a market is. Now, what I find interesting in the lean startup space is that they don't define what a market is. They just leave it blank. But what they say is, let's go hypothesize the market, the product, and the customer needs all at once, and then go out and test it through customer discovery and see if there is a fit. And if not, let's pivot, let's iterate until there is a fit. Well, this is a very recursive process, and it's asking the entrepreneur to solve for 3 parts of the equation at once: the market, the needs, and the product. And what we're going to suggest here is that you just do one thing at a time. Just define the market first, and you'll see the relevance of getting that right before you move on to defining the customer's needs, which of course should take place before you start defining what the product is as well. So when you look at a market through a company lens or the drill maker's lens, markets are typically defined around products or verticals or demographics or use cases or personas. We've seen markets defined in so many different ways, and it's very inconsistent. And it's even inconsistent within companies, how they define their markets. Now, when you look at the market definition through the jobs to be done lens, it becomes much more obvious how we should define a market. Because if we are trying to create products for people who are trying to get a job done, well, why don't we define the market as the group of people and the job they're trying to get done? Makes perfect sense, right? Interventional cardiologist trying to restore blood flow in an artery. It's a group of people trying to get a job done. They hire angioplasty balloons and stents. We have dairy herdsmen who try to optimize dairy herd productivity. We have legal teams who are trying to discover information that supports or refutes a case, such as with the Kroll-On-Track example. So obviously there's many different markets, but when we define them this way, it establishes a stable focal point for long-term value creation, because the underlying job stays the same over time. Use cases, personas, demographics, all the other ways that people define markets can change, especially if you define your market around the product or technology itself, because when the product becomes obsolete, your market then goes away. That's not the reality, right? In reality, your product is replaced with another technology that's getting the underlying job done better. And if you can stay focused on what the underlying job is, that's your first advantage. So then we move into the second step, where we're going to define the customer's needs. And again, let's start with a quick poll. Is there agreement on your product team as to what a customer need is? Okay, so we'll keep this open for a little bit. Please participate. Is there agreement on your product team as to what a customer need is? And again, we're not saying what the customer's needs are and which are unmet. It's just, do we agree on what a need actually is? And the results coming in. And we see roughly 70% saying, no, we don't agree on what a need is. So you can see this problem becoming a bit more complex, right? Because now there's 2/3 of the market that, or 2/3 of people on product teams that say we don't agree on what a market is. 70% say we don't agree on what a customer need is. And that's going to present some problems, obviously, right? And what we often see is needs defined as solutions, benefits, requirements, exciters, delighters, pains, gains, value drivers, latent needs. You could go on. I've heard 40 different terms used to describe what a customer need is. But of course, just like any process, any old input's not going to do the trick, right? We got to be more precise in terms of the input we're trying to include into the process. And when we look at a market through a jobs to be done lens, what a need is becomes much more obvious. Needs should be the measurable outcomes that people are trying to achieve as they go about getting their job done, right? So needs are tied to the job. They're not tied to the product or the customer or anything else. They're tied to getting the job done better. I like thinking about it like this, typically in this hierarchy where there's the high level job the customer is trying to get done. They go through a series of job steps in order to execute the job. And below that, they have all these measurable outcomes that they're trying to achieve in each step in order to get the job done perfectly. So let me offer a quick example. This comes from the surgical space. It's surgeons who are trying to remove an anatomical structure. And you can see establishing the initial access, gaining visual access to find the pathway to the structure, navigate through the barriers, terminate the blood supply, mobilize the target, and so on. Now, what you notice here is that none of these statements describe what the customer is doing or what solutions they're using. It's all about what are they trying to accomplish. And this is what we're trying to figure out from a needs perspective. What are people trying to achieve and what are they trying to avoid as they go about and get the job done? Like in number 25, trying to minimize the time it takes to locate the vessels that are feeding the target structure. This is an instruction from the surgeon to your product team to say, hey, if you can help me minimize the time it takes to locate the vessels that are feeding the target structure, that's going to create value for me. And that's something I'm trying to achieve. Number 28, this is something they're trying to avoid. I want to minimize the likelihood that bleeding occurs when terminating the blood supply to the target structure. Again, a very specific instruction that's coming from the customer to describe how they measure success when getting a job done. And what we've learned over the years is that there are many outcomes that people have when they're trying to get a job done. It's not 5 or 10, it's generally in the range of 75 or more. Complex jobs, we've seen as many as 150. But the point is, these are knowable. These are discoverable. They're not latent needs. People know what they're trying to achieve. They know how they're measuring success when they get a job done. And by focusing on them through this lens, we're able to get a complete set of customer needs. You'll probably notice they were all structured in a very specific format as well. And we went back and said, and this is years ago, we went back and said, how can we define a need statement in such a way that it makes it knowable, discoverable, solution independent, measurable, controllable, unambiguous, valid across geographies, and stable over time? Now, that's a lot to ask for a statement, but we created these with that in mind. And as we've modified these over the years and refined them, we find that there's two types of statements that we can use to measure success when getting a job done. We know that people are trying to get a job done faster, more predictably, with higher output throughput, get a better result. And so the statements all look in a consistent fashion here. There's a direction of improvement, a metric, an object of control, and a contextual clarifier. Minimize the likelihood of damaging blood vessels along the pathway to the structure. Again, the same kind of construct that we have for the outcome statement. And all these needs are collected and organized and categorized in the same exact manner. These, we believe, are the perfect input into the innovation process because they can be used, they can be captured by customers, and they're useful inputs all the way through your product development process, because they're instructing your team what the customer is trying to do and how they measure value. So it provides 100 plus timeless statements that inform your company's value creation efforts for years to come. These statements are stable over time. So once you have them, just like in that surgical example, those were outcomes on that procedure 20 years ago. The same outcomes today. They'll be the same outcomes 20 years from now. What might change is their ability to satisfy them because new technology comes along that gets the job done better. But knowing how people measure success in this timeless fashion is it's just a great competitive advantage. The third piece is then figuring out, well, which of these needs are unmet? If I have 100 plus needs, I can't focus on all of them. Which ones do I look at? Well, let's ask this question. Is there agreement on your product team as to how to best prioritize unmet customer needs? Is there agreement on how to best prioritize unmet customer needs? Now, we already know that there's a bit of a struggle defining the market and that there isn't great agreement on what a need is, but is there agreement on how they're best prioritized? And John's going to share that, and we can see the results. And this is a very resounding, roughly 90% of you say, no, there isn't agreement on how to best prioritize unmet needs. So you see the complications building, right? If we can't agree on what a market is, if we don't agree on what a need is, if we can't agree on what an unmet need is, then it's really going to be hard for us to agree on the solution that addresses unmet customer needs. What we're going to do is define an unmet need as the measurable outcomes that people struggle to achieve. So if all those outcomes, where are they struggling to get the job done? And to figure that out, we rely on quantitative research, where we go out to customers, hundreds of them, and ask them to tell us, how important is it that you're able to achieve each outcome? And given the solution that you're using, how satisfied are you with your ability to achieve that outcome? Now, with those two questions, we have some really interesting data points because we can plot out what percent of the market is telling us an outcome is very or extremely important, yet it's not very or extremely satisfied. In other words, it's an important outcome, but not that well satisfied. Well, if that's the case, we want to recognize that as an unmet need. And we'll associate an opportunity score with it. So we can measure not only if it's unmet, but how unmet it is on the grand scheme of things. What this allows us to do is to look at a market and figure out pretty quickly, as we plot all the needs, each dot is one need, one outcome, we can quickly figure out where the market's underserved. Right? So this is where you're trying to create more value for your customer by getting the job done better. But at the same time, we can find where the market's overserved. And this is where you may look for cost reduction efforts so you can help the customer get the job done more cheaply. And overall, that's exactly what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to come up with solutions to get the job done better and more cheaply. That's the winning strategy in nearly every market. So the benefit of this, well, the innovators know which of the 100 plus needs are unmet and to what degree. So you know in priority order the most efficient path to growth. The next step in the process is to segment the market. Now, notice we don't segment the market up front. We just define the market as a group of people in the job they're trying to get done. We discover all their needs and which are unmet. And now what we're going to do is segment the market in a unique way. Before I get into it, is there agreement on your product team as to how to best segment the markets you serve? And please participate. Is there agreement on your product team as to how to best segment the markets that you serve? Okay. John, I think we could end it and share. We look at about 75% are saying, no, there is no agreement on how to best define a market segment. And we see this in practice quite frequently. When you look at segments through a company lens, you normally define segments around personas and use cases and people with different attitudes, behaviors, different demographics, psychographics. But when you look at a market through a jobs to be done lens, it makes much more sense to define a segment as a group of people or a subset of the market that has a different or unique set of unmet needs. And this goes back to marketing 101. Segmentation drives strategy. We know that customers don't agree on which needs are unmet. In other words, there are always segments of people with different unmet needs. Now, companies often use demographic, psychographic, use cases, personas. Many of these methods, they're simply proxies for segmenting around unmet needs. And use cases and personas are often built assuming that people in those segments have different needs than people in other personas and use cases. And we find this often be a mistaken approach because these segments may not exist at all. And there's one way to figure this out, right? The best way to discover segments of people with different unmet needs is to segment around the unmet needs. Makes perfect sense, right? Now, most companies struggle to do that because they can't agree that a market's a group of people in a job to be done. They don't agree on what a need is. They don't agree on the best ways to prioritize those needs. And they don't agree on the best way to segment markets. Now, if you could agree that we should define markets as a group of people in a job to be done and needs as outcomes and unmet needs as under or overserved outcomes, then we can segment the market around unmet customer needs. For example, let's say a third of your population that you sample says outcomes 10, 20, and 30 are really important and unsatisfied. And another third thinks outcomes 40, 50, and 60 are really important and unsatisfied. And another third thinks another set of outcomes are important and unsatisfied. Well, by running factor analysis around those needs, we can figure out that these outcomes are the outcomes in which there's the most variation or disagreement. And we can quite literally cluster people and put them into segments based on their unmet needs. And only after we've done that, then we can profile the segments to see who's in them. And this is more of a needs-based persona, if you will. It's not demographic, psychographic based. It's quite literally a segment of people with different unmet needs profiled around why they have different unmet needs. Again, we're not presupposing a segmentation scheme. Like age, for example, we're not saying, oh, let's use age as a segmentation scheme and place people in different segments. We're letting the unmet needs tell us that there's different segments and then profiling the segments after we've segmented around the unmet needs. A very different approach, but it leads directly to a set of segments with different unmet needs. And we often see landscapes that look like this. People trying to get the same job done. Some are overserved, some are appropriately served, some are underserved for a variety of reasons. And this gives us much needed insight into specifically targeting certain products at certain segments of the market. The benefit of this, you have authentic, by that I mean non-phantom. These are really real segments that actually exist, and they are groups of people with different unmet needs. This becomes discoverable when you get this far into the process because of the way we define a market, the way we define needs, and the way we define unmet, and the way we segment the market. So here we are at the back end of the process. And what we've effectively done sounds like basic marketing 101. Define your market, define the needs, figure out which are unmet, see if there's segments of people with different unmet needs, and then come up with your strategy. But of course, unless you align around this type of mindset, that becomes extraordinarily difficult. Let me go into the final section here. This is kind of a yes or no question. Is the goal of ideation to come up with lots of ideas and then determine which ideas are best? It goes to the goal of ideation. What is the goal? Is it to come up with lots of ideas and then determine which ideas are best? It looks here like we got pretty much a split down the middle, roughly 45 to 55%. 45, 46 saying yes, I agree with that. And others saying no. Well, we don't agree with that either. It often is the approach that's taken, but should it be? Would be the question. Ideation often encourages lots of ideas. And you've all heard the saying, there is no such thing as a bad idea. I think we know that's not true. An idea that's going to fail in the marketplace is a bad idea, and you want to avoid that idea. And the way to do that is to think about ideation a little bit differently. What we want to do is generate ideas around specific outcomes that we know already are unmet. So if we can come up with a solution to address that outcome, we know it will be valued in the market because we know upfront that it's an unmet need. And of course, this changes the dynamics of everything. When we think about it through this lens, the first thing we do is create what we call the innovation strategy. Once we have all our data back, you want to figure out what segments and outcomes do I want to target to put me on the most efficient path to growth. When we worked with Bosch to enter the North American circular saw market, they wanted a differentiated product that would beat DeWalt and Makita, which meant we had to find an underserved segment that had some unmet needs. We discovered that segment. That's the one they targeted. They had 14 unmet outcomes that they went to address, and that put them on the most efficient path to growth. So the way we do this in general is to take all the information that we've talked about, all the outcomes by segment. We have opportunity scores for each, and we can see if there are unmet needs that span the entire market. We call these high leverage opportunities. When they exist, they're great to see. These are super opportunities. And what this means is if you act on these outcomes, it would appeal to 100% of your user population. All right. So that's why it's high leverage. We don't find them that often, but when we do, again, take advantage of them. And then we have cross-segment opportunities. There may be outcomes that are opportunities in multiple segments. And then, of course, there are segment-specific opportunities that could register high opportunities just for a percentage of the market. And by understanding what exists, you can put yourself on the most efficient path to growth. In other words, you want to focus on the fewest number of outcomes that would have the greatest impact on the biggest customer population. So your innovation strategy is really your strategy in problem space. This is saying how you want to go about targeting these outcomes. Now, as we go into solution space, you'll see that you may not be able to target all those outcomes in the same, in the order in which you'd like. You may not have the capabilities. You may not have the ability to invest in some of those and so on. So the actions your organization will take to address these opportunities is what we call the growth strategy. And this is where ideation and innovation become measurable. We have our list of outcomes in priority order. We know the level of satisfaction for each solution that currently exists in the market. And we're brainstorming solutions to address each outcome to drive more value into the equation so that we know our next solution is going to get the job done significantly better along those top underserved dimensions. And this is the path that you follow year after year until eventually you're getting the job done perfectly for your customer. This is the trick, right? How did Bosch know that this product was going to win in the market with a high level of confidence before they even started developing it? Well, they had this feature set, right? And how did they know that was the right feature set? Because it addressed these unmet needs. How did they know they were the unmet needs? Because they segmented the market around unmet needs, discovered a segment that had 14 unmet needs, and that was their target. And of course, they started this by studying the entire job to be done so they could leave no stone unturned, look at all the opportunities and discover those that made the biggest difference in the marketplace. So from a very high level, there's a lot of benefits here of taking on an innovation process that looks like outcome-driven innovation. First off, it strategically aligns the efforts of marketing, sales, development, R&D around a shared understanding of what a market is, what a need is, what the needs are, which needs are unmet, if there's segments of people with different unmet needs, and then how you address them to devise a winning solution. Without that alignment, and you saw that in the meeting today, right? If 50 to 80% of you say that your teams don't agree on these 5 critical factors, then it's really going to be hard to succeed consistently at innovation. By focusing on or pursuing big ideas, getting there first, winning every time, you can optimize the allocation of company resources as well, because you're not investing in products that aren't going to go anywhere. You're just investing in things that you know are going to win. Also, with this kind of thinking, it's a new mindset that brings a common language for innovation, a culture of innovation that can lead to consistent success. And this is why we've been pushing the adoption of outcome-driven innovation over the years. This presentation here is designed mainly as a mindset shift discussion, just to point out that unless we have an understanding around these basics, it's going to be really hard to excel at innovation. And when you do excel at innovation, you can pull off like what the medicines company did. They got acquired by Novartis last year at a 41% premium, and they had adopted ODI and applied it not only to all their products, but to their business processes as well. And as Clive Meanwell says, it drove our technology selection, our development priorities, manufacturing strategies, commercial planning. This is an example of when an organization thinks like this at scale. And this is what we're encouraging. And our goal is to change the way the world innovates a little bits at a time and drive success along each step of the way. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the approach, there is the free book, which is an ebook and an audiobook as well. And if you want to engage with Strategen, we can help you do a few things. We can help you conceptualize a winning product. This is what we spend our days and nights doing. We can also help you build an innovation capability so that you can conceptualize your own winning products consistently over time. Yeah, we can also help you become an ODI champion inside your organization as well. Make you armed and dangerous enough so that you can communicate the value of the approach and start applying it from a grassroots, bottom-up type of environment.